Tim Sid. I would like to read a little bit about Tim for those of you who don't know him. Tim Sid works as a social worker. By the way, thank you, Kim. Yeah. So this part is going to be recorded, and then we will share it on the Satir Global website for those of you who cannot attend, and for those of you who would like to share this educational material with other people, so we can spread the knowledge and the word about Satir's work further. So this is gonna be where it starts. Tim Sid works as a social worker in private practice, working with individuals, couples, and families. He has been studying Virginia Satir's work for 13 years. And her work is the foundation of his approach with people in all his roles. His work revolves around two major themes that impact health and well-being: self-connection and the freedom of movement. He does business consulting work through his company Think Move, which aims to help address health and wellness in the workplace through a moving mindset. He's the author of the book Move or Die: How the Sedentary Life is Killing Us and How Movement, Not Exercise, Can Save Us. He's currently working on two related books that are inspired and informed by Virginia Satir's work: The Path of Self-Connection, which is about creating a connection to our deeper core self, and Love Skills, which is about manifesting the beauty within us. He's exploring the idea that we are all born with a yearning for love, but we need to learn how. He's a co-host on the podcast called the Self-Connection Podcast with Sharon Lershin, the president of Satir Global, which is available on iTunes and the website freedomtomovegroup.com. Over to you, Tim.
Hi, everyone. I just want to move that to speaker view. Okay. Thank you for that introduction, Daria. There's a couple of things that come to mind when you were sharing the poem, the idea of taking a risk. I feel very vulnerable in this moment sharing what I'm going to share. It comes from a great passion of studying Virginia's work and wanting to expand my own thinking and to add something to the model which will be useful. I want to dedicate this talk, this presentation, to Virginia Satir. So Linda, thank you for inviting her spirit to be with us. You know, her work has influenced me in so many different ways. And I'd also like to dedicate this presentation to my mother, who passed away in January. And one of the experiences I had as she passed away was just seeing her suffering end. And so my wish for this talk is that it can contribute to, in some way, ending or reducing unnecessary suffering. So with that, the talk today, and I'm going to start to share my slides. So just one second. Let me see how I do this. The topic, or the title of this talk, is Towards Congruence: Integrating the Hierarchical Model with the Seed Model. So just by a show of hands, how many people are familiar with this comparison and contrast? You can either just raise your hand like visually, or you can raise your hand virtually. If you're familiar with it, and I'm going to get into sort of the details of this for people who are not aware of what this is. This has to do with the foundational beliefs that shape the model, the Satir model. And so I've referenced many different materials, different books, but the primary one is the Satir model by John Banman, Maria Gamori, Jane Gerber, and there's one more author. No, I think that's everyone. Jane Gerber, Maria Gamori, and John Banman, and Virginia Satir. So beliefs are in my experience, especially in the last little while, they're not just thoughts. They're more and more, to me, they seem like they're living things. They're processes that come alive for us. And beliefs are extremely important because they guide where our life force will go or beliefs resonate with certain aspects of our life force. In the pathological view, I'm going to split up the hierarchical model into two different perspectives, one being pathological or toxic, and one being health promoting and growth promoting. In the pathological version of it, you are what you do. So if you make a mistake, if you do something wrong, you're labeled as bad and no good and flawed. A conclusion is made. And one of the things that Virginia's work taught me was to believe in the inherent worth of all people. The belief that people cope on the basis of their learning, on the models that they had in their growing up. And, this was in the early part of my career when I was working with youth in a residential program. This was made very visible to me because the children that were living in this residential treatment program, they were crown wards, they were abandoned by their family, their parents were addicted to drugs, or they had such severe mental health challenges that they weren't able to care for their children. And so they came with such troubling behavior. And the primary mode of helping these children was behavioral modification when I arrived at this children's mental health clinic. And so Virginia's work was very, very helpful and grounding for me because of what she taught in terms of the seed model, the ability to see and to connect with the life force in all people, regardless of the pattern of behavior, the pattern of coping that was manifesting at a particular time, whether that be psychopathology, aggressive behavior, or what have you. So stating that, I want to preface my talk with, I'm aware that what I'm about to share is a critique in a way. And I'd like to share this as a way not to talk about what was missing in what Virginia did. I mean, what she did in one lifetime, which was cut short, by anyone's estimation. I think she thought she was going to live to be 120 and she died at around 72. But what she did in her 72 years was many, many, many lifetimes. And so I believe it's our work and my wish to add to that. And so she talked about adding to a soup, how important that is to be able to evolve her work. And so that's simply what I want to do here. I want to add a perspective that can hopefully bring about more peace. So I'm going to state what the challenge is or what the problem is. Virginia's core belief, when she would teach this, and I saw this in interviews and I saw this in different writings, and it's in the Satir model, often the comparison between the hierarchical model and the seed model would be a comparison and contrast where the hierarchical model is essentially bad or antiquated and the seed model is good and it's the next evolution. So with talking about the hierarchical model, she used different words to point at what this was. The hierarchical model, dominant submission, threat and reward, and the mechanical model. And mechanical model, I think, is a word that maybe points at it really well, and we'll get into that more. But as I read and I thought about what she was saying and what I was reading, I thought, what exactly is she talking about? I'm very interested in words. I've read a little bit about Korzybski and who was an important influence on Virginia. And the way she talked about hierarchical model was conceptually confusing for me. It was difficult to understand. And if concepts are confusing, it makes it difficult to communicate with others what exactly we're talking about. So my hope is that by clarifying some of these ideas, we'll be better equipped to talk about what is amazing, what is incredible, what's innovative about Virginia Satir's work. Okay, so one of the gaps for me was we are all, one of the beliefs of the seed model is we're all people equal of worth. And yet we have different roles. Okay, so how do we reconcile this? When is it appropriate to make judgments about good or bad as it relates to specific roles and particular contexts? How can we make judgments at the level of function and role and still retain the dignity of the human being? So I'll give you a clinical example. I was working with a young man, been dating the same woman for 10 years, and he was very apprehensive about whether he should marry this woman. And he said, what I should do is I should be loving, and I should be accepting of her. That's what I should do. And I said, well, let's, what are you having trouble accepting? And he said, well, she drinks a lot of alcohol and she smokes pot every day. And I don't really like those things. That's not kind of my vision for health. And she doesn't really have goals, and she doesn't really want to change. And she doesn't want children, and I want children. And, her parents lie and they gamble, and there's no trust here. And so as I listened to him, I thought, oh, geez, like, you're making this huge decision of who you're going to marry and who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And you've had a pretty good sample size of this person, 10 years. If you can't discriminate and make a wise choice based on who you're going to marry, when can you make that? So that's a particular role, that's a particular context. And so we're not talking about judging people at the level of their self, but as it pertains to a particular context and role. So the question that I have is, what resources or aspects of reality are lost when we pit the two models against each other? And what happens when you bring them together? What happens when you bring hierarchical model and seed model together? Can we take what is useful from hierarchical model, acknowledge what is there, and discard what is not? So I'm not doing a very good job of moving through my slides. So this is just the idea that beliefs are very important to the way that we live. And okay, so that's just a picture to distract you for a second. If we end the conversation with hierarchical model is bad, and we label certain aspects as we label it pathologically as the hierarchical model is bad, we may be ill-equipped to deal with certain parts of the hierarchical model which are part of reality. My idea is that we need to reclaim the hierarchical model in relationship to the seed model and create something new. I believe that this model, this seed model, is best served with a relationship between them. And really, I have Virginia to thank for this. This idea that whatever we're looking at, there's a resource within it. And we have to excavate that resource and figure out what's there. So when she did a parts party, sometimes there would be a part that would be labeled a Hitler or some evil dictator, something like that. And she would work hard with that person to dig and find the resource and to find the goal. So that's what we're attempting to do today. So what I'm asking and inviting everyone to think about is, can you perceive, can you experience the hierarchy that exists in your life right here, right now? So I'll give you some examples. When COVID hit, there was a need to use online tools for conferencing. For myself and in my business, in my private practice, I needed to find an online tool. And so all the online tools were competing with one another, and they entered into a competition with one another to see which one would win. And Zoom clearly won. We're all on Zoom now. Most people I know are using Zoom. Another example is Kim, Daria, Stephen, and Sharon. In terms of creating a context for us to meet, are in the foreground and background, creating the structure for this meeting. We all cooperate and submit to a structure, a leadership, with people having a certain role, like a president or a board. And, we get shuttled off into triads and we're muted. And there's a certain order and a structure, which is hierarchical. And as long as this serves our humanity, we can accept it. So hopefully you all feel okay about Kim's power. So in this moment, right now as I'm speaking, I'm having a bunch of emotions come up. I feel, I have these thoughts coming up that are from my ego. I might feel nervous about being judged or rejected, or are people going to think what I'm saying makes sense or doesn't make sense? All these kinds of thoughts of the ego are coming up. And well, I anticipated them. And what I'm doing is I'm holding my courage stick, a Virginia Satir resource that she points out for us. I don't want to deny that these certain aspects, certain attachments are there, but these are elements of the hierarchy. These are elements of how am I doing in this role? So I've taken on this role to speak and to share something. How am I doing in that role? And I want to acknowledge all those elements, which are hierarchical, accept the judgments that are being made. Hopefully the judgments aren't being made about my personhood, but to avail myself to whatever positive or negative feedback that will help me grow in my role. maybe to become a better speaker, to sharpen what I'm writing here. So as we're going, I forgot to mention right at the beginning that as I'm going through this material, I want you all to write in comments or ask questions or give your critique into the comment box. And I've asked Stephen Buckby to help me capture those comments and questions. And when there might be a pause, he's going to help sort of filter through. If there's something I haven't answered or spoken to, then we'll have that discussion. But please, just to make this a little bit more interactive, there is going to be other experiential parts later on. But as we're going through this, feel free to ask questions in the chat box and comments. So in terms of acknowledging the hierarchical model, there's certain parts of our brain, certain parts of our evolutionary history that are dominant and submissive, that are related to threat and reward. And these aspects of the hierarchical parts of our reality are millions and millions of years old. They're part of our biological inheritance. So you see on the screen, there's a picture of lions. And I've been watching a lot of animal documentaries because my 3-year-old son loves animals, and they're good things to watch during this time of COVID. So lions organize themselves in prides. Elephants organize themselves based on a matriarch. And even lobsters possess the serotonin system that allows them to monitor their status in the hierarchy, such that when they lose a battle, they'll cower away. But if you give them a little surge of serotonin, they'll re-engage in a battle with the alpha lobster. So we share some common ancestry. So the antidepressants that we use helps deal with our depression. So there's an ancestral commonality between us and animals, but there's something unique about human beings as well. Okay. Whoops. I want to go back. Okay, so let's just focus on the lobsters for a little longer. So there are many different types of hierarchies. There are hierarchies of competence. There's hierarchies of social status, skill, roles in an organization. You organize your friends based on a hierarchy. You have a best friend. You have a close circle. You have acquaintances. These are all hierarchical structures that are natural, healthy, and useful. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. Hierarchy is the pattern of how we do anything. So it could be our personality, the status quo, our family patterns, patterns of relationship, and cultural patterns. So if we just think about any kind of pattern, any kind of rigid pattern that takes form over time, that orders us, could be thought of as hierarchical. There are certain patterns, as we're talking about biologically, for example, the limbic system, fight, flight, and freeze. Virginia used and created these sculptures that demonstrated the human forms of this. So fight, flight, and freeze would be blaming, placating, super reasonable, and distracting. These are all survival level coping stances. All right, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time for these next few slides. They're very dense. And the reason why they're dense is I'm working on this book about self-connection, and I'm doing a lot of writing, and I'm focusing on that, and trying to pare down and make this simple is very difficult. But this is the basic, these are notes basically from the Satir model, which is this book here. I don't know if you can see that, the Satir model. And this breaks down into 4 categories between the hierarchical model and the growth seed model. The first is a definition of a relationship, how we perceive a pairing. So on the hierarchical side, people are of unequal value. One dominates and one submits. And on the growth side, people are of equal value. In terms of defining a person, people are defined by their role, and people should act out of their roles properly to have any worth. So my whole self-definition, my worthiness as a human being, is based on how well I do in my role as a mother, as a father, as an employee, as a therapist, all the different hats that I wear. What Virginia pointed out is we can appreciate ourselves at the level of our life force, that we are all unique manifestations of life, and we can appreciate our uniqueness and our differences. In terms of defining an event or understanding how events occur within the hierarchical model, there's an attribution of a linear way of thinking. A causes B, right? maybe a personality attribution. This person is bipolar. This person's narcissistic. So there's a kind of a label, what Virginia would call bad words, good, bad, right, and wrong. And then on the growth side, there's a perspective which is systemic, that there's multivariate factors that play into a situation that goes across time. And understanding these various factors, for example, understanding how psychopathology can be a manifestation of family dynamics, was a very important contribution which he made in creating, being an important founder of family therapy. The final thing is the attitude towards change. And in the attitude towards change within the hierarchical model, there's a resistance to change. Change is bad. Change is scary. Do not change order. In the growth and seed model, change is inevitable, and you can survive through it. You can not only survive through it, you can grow. So to learn to welcome change. Okay, so this is, so just if you could follow along with me, just start with the top and I'll read through it. This is the integration. This is my attempt at integrating the hierarchical model with the growth and seed model. Okay, so instead of having one against the other, a definition of a relationship could be people are of equal value at the level of their self. So what Linda was talking about when she was she was guiding us through a meditation, our connection to life, the pulsating, the animation of our bodies, our soul, we all possess that. And at that level, we're all equal. When we relate, we enter into specific contexts where we may have roles, mother, father, child, and we develop egos, we develop identities towards a particular goal. So in a company, it's to create this product so we can make money. And we need to find a way to be in these roles while also honoring the dignity of the human beings in that role. So I'll give it a good example of this. Because of COVID, my wife was laid off, and she was working. It was a new job. She was working her butt off, like 10, 12 hours a day, and they just laid her off in a snap and cut off her phone. The company phone that she had pictures of our family on that phone. They just deleted everything. So that would be an example where the hierarchical model, the goals of the company, superseded and was completely disconnected from any kind of humanity. It's like, we need to get rid of you. See you later. This is what we need to do for our bottom line. And the connection to compassion was just not there. The second layer, defining a person, your worth is your worth. You cannot be added to or subtracted from. Your secure base is your life. Each person, and this is from Virginia, each person is a unique manifestation of life force and a basic miracle. People can manifest their unique energy through the various roles they possess. Fulfillment and meaning can be experienced to the extent that we express ourselves authentically through the roles that fit. Okay, in terms of defining an event, when it fits, I use linear thinking. A causes B in a cause and effect fashion. So for example, if I'm asking for directions, I want to know the linear directions. If I'm doing a recipe, I want to know what's the order of how I'm going to do things. If I've done something specifically to hurt someone, I want to know how my behavior led to an impact in somebody else. So the point I'm making with this is, yes, there's a systemic lens, but we can't lose the linear lens. We have to use them in conjunction with one another, and that enriches the conversation. When it fits, I make discerning judgments about good, bad, right, and wrong as it relates specifically to roles, relationships, and context. So what I'm protective of, and when I talk to people that I work with, is protect your I am. Be very careful about what you connect your I am to. Don't, if it's depression, I am a depressed person, or I am a failure, I didn't get a job. Be very protective. I am, period. And if you can be in connection to that, just like Linda led us in the meditation, then we can take feedback about what I did that was good, what I did that was bad, what I did that was right, and what I did that was wrong. There's no problem with that, because roles have expectations, and the clearer we can be with that, we can talk about it. Okay, many ways exist, and we can discover it if we look and use ourselves creatively. I think this is such an important point to the way Virginia worked, that and really what I'm trying to do by bringing the hierarchical model back in connection with growth is to have two paint colors and make a third color, right? Is to play with it rather than having them separated. The final is attitude towards change. Some change is worth resisting. So yes, it's the idea that we do naturally resist change. We want to hang on to status quo, and there's good reason for that. We don't want to accept every kind of change. So if your, 7-year-old son or daughter is going to school and, their kid pulls out a pack of cigarettes and says, well, here's the foreign element, here we go into the change process, should I do it? It's not all change is the same. So it's okay to make discerning judgments about that. And so the resistance to change, which is part of the hierarchical model, I have a certain schema, I have a certain way of thinking about things, and I want to protect that, is healthy. Okay. So this slide is, okay, so what I've done with this slide, again, just keep your eye level at the top part. So what I've done here is I've broken down, there's a hierarchical model and the seed model. And I've broken each model into their constructive elements and their dangerous and destructive elements. Okay, so you can just kind of read through that. I'll just read the first few from each list. The constructive resource of the hierarchical model is what I mentioned, resistance to change is good. It provides group cohesion. For example, one person speaks at a time. Certain rules help us group in a way that's helpful. For example, a lot of the rules and guidelines for COVID. What's dangerous, what's potentially just really destructive about the hierarchical model is particularly when it's disconnected from the seed model. So when it's dehumanizing, when it's rigid, when it's tyrannical, when it's all about conformity, when it rejects and resists change absolutely, when it's foolishly obedient, conformity for the sake of the law, rather than critically analyzing those laws, the loss of individual freedom. Also, within the hierarchical model, competition can be a beautiful thing, like in the Olympics, for example. However, competition without connection to the seed model can mean winning at all costs. So I'm going to do, steroids, or I'm going to hurt my competition or something like that. On the side of the seed model, there's what's constructive is being in connection to your inherent worth as a human being, what Virginia called self-esteem, the ability to nurture ourselves and each other at that level is so important for growth. Appreciating our uniqueness, empowered choice making. What's potentially, if we are living just with the seed model without a connection to the hierarchical model, there could be confusion about the self with self-esteem. So I describe the word self-esteem very differently than Virginia. What she was describing with self-esteem is a very different concept than what it typically means as far as psychology is concerned, as far as what scales and assessments of self-esteem relate to. Self-esteem really has to do with your ego and your role. How am I perceiving myself? How am I thinking and feeling about myself at a moment in time? So if I confuse myself, my role, myself is my role, this can lead to narcissism and reduced empathy because it's about outcome. And that's where pride can sort of take us off into a toxic place. The lack of integration with hierarchical considerations means reduced ability to actualize potential. Okay, so these are the different issues that are related to a healthy approach to hierarchy and a toxic approach to hierarchy. So if you just stay with me on the left side, the hierarchical issues that are really worth considering because they're always on the table is, how am I using power? So as a therapist, in my role, there's certain power, and I need to be very conscious in my use of that power, or another way of describing it, in how I use myself, how I enact this role. Whenever there's roles, you're dealing with issues related to hierarchy. So what are the rules, expectations, guidelines? Who's doing what around here, right? If we didn't answer those questions, we wouldn't be able to meet today. Is where the dignity and the value of each person is seen, and upheld regardless of role or rank. So that dignity, the connection to self, as we're speaking to one another, I see your role, but I see yourself behind that or within that. And that's the most important aspect of how I want to connect with you. You know, the role is a function for where we are. So various people on this call are playing various roles, and that's and so that's going to be part of reality that we need to move through. I move in and out of role appropriate to the situation. We both, so in relationship, we both realize the self level and the role level are occurring. And attention to the hierarchical level allows me to comment when I see something that is wrong, foolish, dysfunctional, without shaming. I'm observing something as it relates to the concreteness of a role, and I'm speaking at that level and not commenting on somebody's worth. So within the toxic layer of hierarchy, deferring to the one with power and denying our own observation and intelligence, basically making ourselves foolish to, follow a family rule like, father knows best. When power is used to elevate one person's ego over another person, it's a good definition for bullying. My role and power comes from things that have nothing to do with my developed competency or skill: wealth, race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality. Okay, so in terms of what one way of thinking about the relationship between the hierarchical model and the seed model is to think about order and chaos. The hierarchical model is basically the schemas we use or the patterns of coping that we use to deal and cope with life, to deal with our problems, to have enriching relationships. And the work of Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, I think is very helpful in understanding this relationship. So if you're familiar with Jean Piaget's work, he created these two concepts: assimilation and accommodation. So on the second row there, you'll see basically assimilation is when I have a schema, when I have a model for understanding the world, like cats, for example. I look at every cat I see, I say, that's a cat. When I see a tiger, I say, that's kind of a cat, but it's a little bit different. And I need to accommodate that. I need to come up with a whole new branch of understanding cats. When I see a tarantula, the tarantula has a very hard time fitting into the schema of cats. So I need to accommodate that. I need to create something entirely different. And this is where the seed model is really, really effective. Virginia's change model is very, very helpful because when you're in status quo, you're on the left side of this chart. You're in order, everything works. But when something new happens, when Corona hits, when you're working from home, when you've got the kids at home, now you're in chaos. Now what do you do? And to think about how we expand our consciousness. So for example, you see the word forgiveness on the right-hand side. I see forgiveness as a process of expanding consciousness. That which I thought could be, it stretches me. In order for me to move forward, to reconcile it, I need to forgive myself or I need to forgive someone else to be able to encapsulate that experience of humanity. So you could study these words later, and I'll share these slides with anyone that's wanting to look at them. But essentially, what you see is form, pattern on the left, the iceberg, and you see water, essence, flowing, movement on the right-hand side. Each side needs the other. So the basic question is, when I am using the schema that I have, what do I keep? What do I let go of? And what do I create that's essentially my own? What's essentially new? Okay, so this is a quote by Immanuel Kant. Act in a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. Okay, so I had never had the good fortune of meeting Virginia, but many people tell me that her presence, her way of slowing down and being with you and connecting with you as if you were the only person in the world was so powerful and so nurturing that growth and transformation happen just with a simple meeting. And so this quote, I think, expresses that. And it expresses also the way that we can think about the seed model and the hierarchical model together, which is we relate to each other oftentimes for a specific purpose or a specific context, as it relates to work or relates to family or school. There's this particular context of why we're meeting. But we must never forget the person as an end, the connection and the lived experience of that, the I-thou experience that Martin Buber wrote about. We must never forget that. And when we carry both of these elements together, we can enrich our connections to a level that if we only had one, we'd be limited. Okay, so the integration, the integration of the hierarchy and the seed model generates a new model, which I call the tree of life model. Whoops. Sorry, guys. Which increases the likelihood of accounting and coping well with the challenges of life by retaining the resources of both models through processes which Virginia was known for, dialogue and connection. Okay, here we go. So here's a picture of a tree in all its glory. And if you just start at the bottom, what's been helpful to me in bringing the hierarchical model and the seed model together is thinking of the seed model as ourself, our yearnings, our roots. And so it exists at that level. The seed starts in the ground. And these roots could be thought of as our ancestry, our biology, our spirit, our values. If you're spiritually oriented, it could be God, and your most important values, your lived values. If we transition to where the branches are, each branch represents its own unique role. So family role, professional role, student, friend, and within each branch is a square. And that square represents a different hierarchical context. Each hierarchical context has its own rules, goals, guidelines, expectations. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to live out our potential, our seed, into each of these boxes, into each of these contexts. And, as I thought about this and I've been thinking about what's the trunk about, it really struck me that the trunk represents connection and dialogue. That connection is life force itself. It's the movement between these two layers. And this is incredibly useful because I don't want to be stuck on my role. If I think I'm my role and I've identified my worth, I identify myself there, and I have no roots, then it's a tree without roots falls over. And a tree with only roots is a stump. So, I believe self-connection, the life force needs expression to fully manifest. And so that's what, the branches are reaching towards heaven. They're reaching towards human potential. So the relational nature of all of life is represented by the trunk. And in our own connection within ourselves, between our spirit and what we're manifesting through our work, is the relational nature of all of life. Okay, so here's a famous Virginia Satir quote, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. She writes, "We connect on the basis of our sameness and grow through our differences." So one way of thinking about what we're talking about here is we experience sameness at the level of our common humanity, our deepest human universals, our yearnings, our seed level, and our differences are going to occur at the hierarchical level. Our personalities, our personality differences, our family differences, they're going to manifest at that level. And sorry, I'm just... Yeah, so in the particular context of work, home, and school, that's where the growth is going to happen, right? So, this is the way to wash the dishes. This is the right way. And so you battle it out, and hopefully your roots will be strong enough that you can manage that conversation and learn to accept each other or reconcile that difference. And for example, sorry, let me just skip to this next slide. Okay, so if we can acknowledge our thoughts and feelings at the level of hierarchy, the level of what's happening at the role, then we can reduce the amount of times that we're denying things, that we're not talking about things. We can connect to the more transcendent perspective and energy that is the seed model. So it's the action, interaction, movement, relationship, the trunk of that tree, the connection and dialogue between seed model and hierarchical model that is the force of life. All right, so I've not been to church in like 20 years. I'm not really religious myself, but sometimes these, from my old Bible school days, sometimes these Bible verses just pop into my head. And this was the one that came up just this morning. Then Jesus told them, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. So here we see one way of thinking about this verse is the hierarchical model and your seed level. So we are functioning all the time at least two levels, two dimensions. And if we can account for these levels, we can be true to our, if you don't like the word God, we can be true to our self. We can be true to our life force. We can be true to our own soul, our own spirit. And then what we're doing at the level of role, paying bills, working a job, serving our kids, that is for that. And what we can do is we can bring our spirit, we can bring our values, we can bring our life force to serve that context to the best of our ability. Okay. When the shoulds, expectation, roles at the hierarchical level fail to serve humanity, the self within each of us, we need to discard what is no longer useful and create what will affirm and serve life. So I'll read that again. When the shoulds, expectation, roles at the hierarchical level fail to serve humanity, I guess you could add organizations or family patterns or personality patterns. When those structures fail to serve life, we need to let them go and create something entirely new. And that's where being in connection to the seed model helps us, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, create something new. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Not bad. Okay. It's very strange to be talking and hearing no sounds and not getting any feedback from you people. So that's my experience at this time. I'm going to ask Sharon Lotion to help me out. So Sharon, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Sharon.
Blowing me away, man. This is fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to see the hierarchical model and the seed model in action. So I asked Sharon if it's okay if we talked about this interaction we had a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. Is it still okay to talk about this?
Sure.
No pressure. Okay. Okay. So like a month ago when these Zoom meetings started, Sharon had asked me to do the meditation. And then when the day happened, somebody else did it. Someone else was called upon to do it. And I thought, oh, what happened there? And like my ego, my feelings, I felt confused. I felt hurt. I felt sad. And Sharon and I were going to be, this is like a little example, but I think it illustrates the point really well. And so, anyways, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask for 4 volunteers. So one person is going to play the hierarchical level for me and the seed level for me. And one person or 2 other people are going to play the hierarchical level for Sharon and the seed level for Sharon. Okay. So I'm not really sure the best way to do this, but just maybe unmute yourself or write in the box or something. Maybe Kim and Daria have some ideas of the best way to do this. We didn't really prepare for this, so I'm sort of springing it on them. But just volunteer yourself. We need one person to represent maybe my mind at the level of hierarchical. So you could see in this slide, hopefully, the hierarchical level concerns things like ego, role, function, expectations, goals, responsibility, power, reactive emotions, survival coping. And the seed level have to do with myself at that core self level, the life energy level, yearnings, appreciation of differences, equality of humanity, openness to change, and systemic views of events. So can people I encourage people to just be brave and to say, I will be for Tim, and or some other people have some other ways of doing it. So I think Miriam is coming. Miriam Lotion, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Can I get you to be the seed level for Sharon?
Sure.
Okay. And can I get another volunteer?
Kim, I'll volunteer. It's Jean.
Hi, Jean. Can you be my seed level?
I will try.
Okay, thank you. And can I get some hierarchical people? Eva?
Sure.
Okay, Eva, can you be my hierarchical level, please?
All right.
Okay, and can I get one person to play the hierarchical level for Sharon?
I'll try it.
Hi, Richard. Thank you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So, I told you the scenario. I was, Sharon had asked me to do. I was happy to do it, excited to do the meditation like a month ago, and somebody else got picked. So, at the level of ego, sorry, who's my hierarchical level? Eva.
Mary.
Okay, so can you just express, at those themes, at the level of role, can you just express feelings, expectations? What do you think it would sound like, Eva, from me?
I feel hurt. I feel rejected. I feel somebody was picked as preferred of me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna say what I, from that level of things, I would take a blaming stance, and I would say, Sharon, how could you forget me? What adult you are, right? I might call you a name, right? So that's strictly at the hierarchical level. So can I hear who's the seed level for me?
I am Jean.
Okay. Hi, Jean. So Jean, can you express what might be going on for me at the level of yearnings, at the level of myself, taking into account my ability to be open to change, to have a wide lens of things, and to see also Sharon's humanity? What might I be expressing or thinking at that level?
Speaking to Sharon, I might say I fell into a bit of chaos when what I expected didn't happen. I had a lot of different feelings, made some probably crazy assumptions, and then realized that I know you appreciate me, and I know you and trust you. And I took a deep breath, and I'll look forward to when I can share a meditation with the group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice, thank you. So that moment with Sharon, I don't know if this is exactly what I said, Sharon, but my intention was to say something like, Sharon, I love you. I know how busy you are with everything. I was looking forward to doing it, and I was sad and confused when it didn't happen. I have a little voice in me that says that I'm not important to you. That's mine. That's my perception. And I want to share this with you because I trust you and want to see what was happening for you. Okay. So we'll flip it around the other way. Can we hear the hierarchical level for Sharon when she heard me say, let's say my reactive pattern. So my reaction was, Sharon, you forgot about me. How could you? So the blaming. What's going on at the hierarchical level for Sharon?
I might say that it was, I might have been surprised. I might not have remembered that I forgot. I might have felt challenged in my role, as if I did something wrong. And I could have also felt angry at being challenged.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's right. Okay. And what would you say to me? How would you express it that's more at that level of ego, of a reactive pattern? What might it sound like?
I might say, what? What do you mean I forgot you? Because I may have not even remembered that I forgot you. I don't know how to express it. I might feel kind of defensive about being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
So from that model, I might actually just shut down and not express the anger that you're challenging me. Or I might also be angry that I forgot, because in the hierarchical model is that would mean I screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I might feel some anger at myself and or shame and feel defensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if she, Sharon has this title, president of the Satir Global. So if she was a really good, let's say, a dictator, she could say, well, I do whatever I want, And so it's, what is it to you, right? Well, I don't have to account for your feelings. There's no seed level there for you. It's like, so what? Okay, so Miriam, can you share what might be going on for you at the seed level, at the level of yearnings, quality of humanity, openness to change?
I think I might be feeling embarrassed, maybe, or just really, I think, sorry. I don't think that's a feeling, but I think mostly embarrassed and wanting to rectify and to honor you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Could you express that as clearly as you can?
Sure. And then, yes, so I think I would maybe start by saying thank you for bringing it to my attention. And I'm sure that wasn't easy for you to say. I see that might have been hurtful, and I understand that may have created some chaos and some not very good feelings within you. I appreciate you. I look forward to doing it again, and I'm grateful that you could come to me and not hold that within you, so that we could clarify and get a really good understanding about what happened, and that you feel seen and heard and not forgotten.
Beautiful. Sharon, I think that's pretty much what you said. Anything you want to add? That's pretty good. I mean, I know you guys are related, but.
Yes, it was what I said. I think even reliving this, I kind of feel sick in my stomach. Related to what Richard said of, it went to blaming myself, not to blaming you, because I love you and I felt, oh God, how did I do that? And embarrassed. So I tried to work that through and say that, and also reassure you that it was not anything to do with how much I care about you and value you. It was just the senior brain issue,
Mm-hmm.
which embarrassed me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 And so I thank you. When we talked about that, we're like, oh, this would be a great example, because I've been talking about some of these things with you.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you. And what we talked about in our interview before was that you and I can play at these levels together.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that so much with you.
Yep.
So, okay, so I know we're running out of time. I do want to give the group a chance to do this exercise, which is essentially what we just did. And you can, you're going to go into triads. One of the three is going to pick out a situation that's troubling them. And there's going to be a role player for the hierarchical level and the seed